Dr. Jared Pelo, MD. Really enjoyed talking to the doctor. So he fascinating backstory. So he went to medical school. He ended up working in an emergency room in the Virginia area, and his older brother started some tech firms. So he decided to start a tech business, helping to create notes, and that turned into an acquisition, eventually acquired by Microsoft. And so very much into the technical area of medicine now. He's got this great organization called Bionic Health that helps people, diagnose what they have, get results from them, and make recommendations. He talks about the difference between precision medicine and longevity medicine. Was very unfamiliar with these terms until I talked to the good doctor, but it's a great conversation of where technology is in medicine, where it's going to go, where he thinks it's going to go. We talk about wearables. Also, I bring up Internet of Things, IoT. Where are we with that? What happened to that? And what AI is going to play in it? This great platform that is created helps many. But it's just a wonderful conversation with Dr. Jared Pello. It's great to talk to people who have a skill in something and want to share it with others. And that's exactly what him and his team are doing. Thanks so much for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Today, Dr. Jared Pello, thank you so much for your time. How will technology shape medicine in the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, it's a great question. I could see it going, like, having a huge impact across medicine. Now, I think in some patients' lives and some doctors' lives, it'll be huge. And that's because of choices they make. I think in medicine overall, it might not have as big of an impact as we want. Just because medicine is hard, it's slow to change. It doesn't always adopt best practices. I mean, we can look in the not very far past and see like huge mistakes we've made in medicine, and then how long it took to correct those mistakes. But if I'll take an optimist view and say, okay, in the next 5 to 10 years, what do I hope medicine looks like? I hope it looks like everybody has an AI assistant in their pocket that's helping them be healthy. And that's kind of different than medicine. I mean, traditional medicine is you diagnose a problem and then you treat it, sometimes with medications, sometimes with other therapies. But that would be my goal: is we all have this little AI assistant in our pocket that nudges us to make good choices and helps us be healthy. And then when we need a doctor, we have access to a doctor, and that's probably just in our pocket as well. Like that's kind of my optimistic view on the patient experience. I mean, not everybody's going to want that. Not everybody's going to, want to share their data. But then on the physician experience, I hope that what we see is, an unburdening of the physician. Like the physician today spends 15 minutes with you, but then spends 15 more minutes on administration and documentation. I'd love for them to spend 30 minutes with you and be able to really pay attention and give you great care. So that's what I hope AI does for us in the next 5 to 10 years.
You mentioned that it's slow to change medicine. Why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's good reasons and bad reasons for it. One good reason is, we want good proof that something works. And there are so many stories in just medical lore and medical history about how that's hard to do. So, for example, I'll give an old time story. So old time story is we used to think stress caused ulcers. And now we know that it's a bacteria, H. pylori. And the doctor that thought that H. pylori caused ulcers, nobody would listen to him. And
Oh,
no matter what he did to try to prove it, nobody would listen. So he took a culture and he grew up a bunch of H. pylori and he drank it and he gave himself ulcers all over his stomach.
wow.
And to prove like this is what's causing ulcers. And so there's kind of extreme story after extreme
Hmm.
story in historical in medicine, but I'll give you a modern day example. So my nephew a couple months ago got appendicitis, and when my sister in law says, you know, my your nephew has appendicitis, I was wondering, I was like, are they going to do the science proven thing, or are they going to do the old school thing? So the science proven thing is now you offer patients antibiotics and you let them go home on antibiotics, and
Hmm.
60% of the time that's going to fix their appendicitis and they'll never have another problem with it.
Wow.
And if it doesn't fix their appendicitis, they come back, they have surgery. And we've proven with multiple studies that that's a better outcome overall for patients. But traditionally, right, somebody gets appendicitis, they get rushed to the operating room, you take out their appendix. And sure enough, for my nephew, even though this data has been around for a decade now, he went to the OR in the middle of the night and had his appendix out. And, you
Wow.
know, he's fine. It's like an appendix is a pretty benign surgery. But when you look at all of medicine and all the people around the world having appendix removed, it's better if we did antibiotics. So that's just
Hmm.
dogma, what we're taught in medical school, what we practice in medicine. It's sometimes extremely difficult to get
Hmm.
a doctor to change their mind on what's actually right, even if you have the data to prove it.
Hmm. I remember as a kid, all my friends would get their tonsils out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We don't do that anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. We've proven that's not. I mean, we used to think that you got your tonsils out so you could breathe better, and it
Yeah.
caused disease if you had your tonsils. And yeah, it's pretty much everybody got their tonsils out. We still do tonsillectomies, usually on adults, because usually we wait until it's actually proven to be a problem.
I see. But on the other side, I mean, things like a break, and my daughter, when she got a fracture in her leg, I mean, the cast was put on without a problem. They took it off. There wasn't any
Mhm.
stitch. I mean, it's come a long way, just
Oh,
in the
yeah.
more optimistic way as well.
Oh, absolutely. And like I love the medical profession. I'm it's a pleasure to be able to serve and to feel like you're actually doing good in the world, and help people. And the cool thing about America is we have the best acute care, meaning emergency care in the world.
Hmm.
Like people come from all over the world to get cancer treatment. If you get stabbed, shot in a car accident, you want to go to an emergency room in America. If you get sick with an infection, you want to go to an emergency room in America. Our hospitals are the best in the world
Mm.
at taking care of acute things. What we're not the best at is chronic care and
Mm.
preventative care. And when you look at dollars spent, like we're kind of terrible at that kind of stuff. And so that's one major switch we need to make in America is we want to become leaders in all of medicine, not just, you know, what's sexy, what makes money, how we
Mm.
can bill insurance. Like we want to
Mm.
become great at all of
Yeah, I mean, my hand went through a glass door as a kid. I think I was 11 or 12, and I still have. I could see the stitches where the where the where the doctor put
it. Yeah.
actual thread through. I mean, that really doesn't
Yeah.
get. There's like glue now, and it's done so differently. But yeah, I never really made that distinction between acute and chronic, because chronic is a serious issue. We have an obesity epidemic. There's,
Yeah.
we're treated with a lot of drugs instead of just nutrition and exercise. I hear you talk about that as well. How essential that is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating when you look at our country and like we have the most means, but we're the most obese. We have the
Mm,
most means, but like we take the most medication in the world.
mm, mm,
And so there's this disconnect. And it's not just medicine's fault. It's society's fault. It's personal fault. It's like we all need to accept responsibility for our own health. We all need to try to educate ourselves. But there are medical system problems. There are societal problems. There are public health things that we could do to help with this. Um, so it is
Hmm.
this paradox. Like we have so much, but like we're not great at everything.
Hmm. And you make a decision, excuse me, a distinction between precision medicine and longevity medicine.
Hmm.
I didn't know either of those terms before looking into hearing you speak. Please discuss.
Yeah, precision medicine, I think you can be very precise and not practice longevity medicine. So, for an example of that, University of Colorado, really cool health system. And the state of Colorado has done this interesting thing where they have a subset of their population that get full genomic testing. So their full genome gets tested.
Wow.
And what's interesting is when you look at genomic data, there are all these claims about what it can do for you. So you'll see people say like you should eat a certain way because of your DNA.
Hmm.
But that really misses like how genetics work. Just because you have DNA doesn't mean that the gene gets expressed or that it's being expressed or any of those things.
Interesting.
But there are some very useful ways that genomic data can be used. And one of those is called pharmacogenomics. So that is, how do I dose medications or how do I prescribe medications based on your DNA?
Hmm.
And the reason that that's useful is because it tells me what kind of enzymes you have in your liver and whether you're a fast metabolizer of that, a slow metabolizer of that medication, or maybe you can't even handle that medication.
Wow.
And the University of Colorado has built that DNA system into their electronic health record. So
Hmm.
if you have heart disease and they need to put you on a statin, they can tell from your DNA which statin they should choose, and they can tell from your DNA how they should dose the statin.
Wow.
And so that's precision medicine. That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I think we can start practicing precision medicine in new and interesting ways, kind of across medicine. Um, that's kind of how I think about precision medicine. Longevity medicine, it really is a philosophy of saying, I'm going to treat this person so that I give them the most healthy years possible. And
Hmm.
some of that is aligning with the person on what their goals are. It's like one person might say, you know, I want a lot of healthy years, but maybe I want, and there's always this trade off between, and we don't really know the data between, say, like vibrancy and longevity. So, some examples of that, you know, there are a lot of people that swear that increasing your growth hormone is a good thing. And
Hmm.
there's other evidence that shows that increasing your growth hormone might cause you cancers. And so some people might say, I feel better when I increase my growth hormone. There's different ways to do that. You can take it as an injection, which is really expensive and it's hard to get. You can take peptide that will increase your growth hormone. There's different ways to do that, and that might not cause you to live longer, but it might give you more health in a shorter period of time.
Hmm.
Some of this is discussing with the patient what are your ultimate goals, like what are we shooting for here? Are we shooting for the best next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? Like what's our goal? And then once we identify our goal, then we can come up with a plan and work backwards. I mean, Stephen Covey kind of started with this, like start with the end in mind. And then you hear about it, there this it's called backcasting, where you and it's all kind of the same thing. You start with
Hmm.
that in mind, and then you plot like how am I going to end up at the outcome that I want from where I'm at today. And so longevity medicine is really using that framework. Like, let's start with what you want, and then let's talk about if it's possible. If you tell me I want to be 120 and run a marathon, well, with today's technology, that's probably not possible.
Hmm.
But let's talk about how to get you to that point. So that's kind of how I think about longevity medicine. Other people might define it differently. Lots of people will say if you're not using biologic aging clocks, then you're not practicing longevity medicine.
Hmm.
Um, so there are different ways that people define longevity medicine, but that's kind of how I define it: is give you the most healthy years in your life.
It seems to me, doctor, you can it's not an or, it's an and with these 2 kinda areas, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Like I personally don't believe you can practice great longevity medicine without precision
Without
medicine. Yeah.
So you went to University of Utah School of Medicine, then you went on to, Virginia, University of Virginia. You were in the emergency room there. You were seeing like 100,000 patients a year, that emergency room. That it was quite an experience.
Yeah, University of Virginia is great tertiary care center. You get a lot of sick patients. Tertiary care just means like if you escalate care, and tertiary is kind of the top level. So like
I see.
University of Virginia, Hopkins, Harvard, they're tertiary care centers. And so that was a really cool experience. And then when I left there, I went into a private practice in Lynchburg, Virginia. And it was second busiest ER in the state,
Wow.
100,000 patients per year, and it was a great experience, just being able to see tons of cases, tons of diversity of the people and the medicine that I practiced. I had the opportunity to be a medical director, which was really cool. Lead a medical team, um, really figure out like how do you recruit great doctors. Um, so all sorts of great experiences. I love the emergency room, and I have story after story
Yeah.
of my time in the emergency room. It's funny. A lot of people ask me like, "Why aren't you still there? Why aren't you still in the emergency room?" And there's a few reasons why. Honestly, people who have longevity in emergency medicine, it's remarkable to me because it's a hard job.
Mm.
It's extremely taxing. You show up and you work 8 to 12 hours, and every one of those minutes, like my stress level was like top of the
Wow.
charts,
Wow.
because it is truly life and death for people. Like you're saving lives. You if you make mistakes, you could lose
Mhm.
lives, and so it's really a high stress job, but super rewarding too. Nothing more magical than saving somebody's life and having
Yeah.
them come back and tell you thank you.
I can't imagine what that's like. It must be so rewarding. But then you go on and you found iScribes. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a pretty big leap, right, into technology, doctor?
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in Utah, and Utah is this funny place where it's not Silicon Valley. You don't have all the technology, but we had a decent amount, like Novell,
Hmm.
WordPerfect, like uh, Adobe. We had these technology
So true.
companies there,
Yeah.
and my brother, who's 14 years older than me, was always a technology entrepreneur. He started his first company when he was 16, and it was walking through real estate and recording it on video, and then and selling that to real estate agents so they could show somebody in the comfort of their home 10 houses on VHS. And uh, and so that was my brother's first company. He founded other companies that were like competitors to Google
Wow.
and stuff like that. So I'd seen my brother build technology, and I always thought, someday I want to build something. I want to
Hmm.
build something that has broader scale, that has more applicability. And I was at Lynchburg, Virginia. I was a medical director in this small hospital. It was in Farmville, Virginia, which was an hour from the mothership. And I would drive to work. And while I was driving, I thought, it really shouldn't be that I have to write my notes every day. And and there's two reasons I thought of this. One is I'd had what in medicine we call medical scribes. So these are usually undergraduate pre-medical students, and they had followed me around at Lynchburg and written my notes for me. I trained them to write medical notes, and then they would write my medical notes for me, and then I'd review it and sign off on it. And so while I was driving to Farmville, I didn't have this in Farmville, and I started thinking, I really wish that I could have that everywhere. And I wonder if someday computers will be able to do this for me. And so those were kind of the beginning thoughts of building iScribes. And I had a friend. He was actually one of my medical scribes, Christopher McGuire. And every once in a while, I would steal him from Lynchburg General, and I'd say, "Hey, I'm just going to pay you. Why don't you come with me to Farmville?" And so we would drive down to Farmville together. I'd bribe him with Taco Bell,
Nice.
and would drive down there together, and I pitched him on this idea. What do you think of this idea? We record doctor patients, and in the short term, we have people working anywhere in the country, and they're writing notes for doctors. And he loved the idea, and so I got into this small business accelerator in Raleigh, Durham, because there's not much technology in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I remember I'm driving back, I'd gotten accepted, and I call up Christopher and I'm like, hey, we got to meet. And we meet up, and he had just applied to medical school. And I was like, forget medical school. We're gonna change the world. We're gonna build this thing called iScribes, and it's gonna change everything for doctors and their documentation. And I remember he's like, okay, I'm going to talk to my dad about it. And he comes back and he's like, my dad thinks it's a bad idea. My dad thinks I should be a doctor.
Can't believe it.
Um, but he took a leap of faith, and he moved down to Raleigh, Durham with me, and we started iScribes. We found another co-founder, and the rest is kind of history. We built it over 3 years. We sold it to Nuance Communications. They make a software called Dragon. And then in Nuance Communications, just an amazing team there of researchers, scientists, physicians, technologists. We built what's called Dragon Ambient Experience, and now that's owned by Microsoft. And tens of thousands of doctors use that every day, and it writes their notes for them. And it revolutionized medicine in that piece of what the doctor has to do.
Incredible. I'm very familiar with Dragon, and especially when Microsoft bought them, but then you were at you kind of moved on to Nuance after iScribes, but then you actually took a position with Microsoft for about a year.
Yeah, and that was just the transition of Microsoft purchasing us.
I see.
And so I was at Nuance. I was chief medical information officer for a while, and then chief clinical product officer. And then when we moved over to Microsoft, continued in that role. And I actually do a little bit of consulting for Microsoft still. I really enjoy working with that team. I think they're doing amazing,
Mm.
amazing stuff.
And that was just last year.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, what's it I mean, I do a lot of partnering with Microsoft, and there's just I don't know anything about this whole medical area though. It's very interesting. Where does it fall under? Where does this area?
Yeah, that's interesting. So it falls under their cloud infrastructure.
Ah.
But there is a very specific area, and it's health and life sciences.
Hmm.
And before they purchased Nuance, it wasn't huge. It was, they'd sell to academic medical centers, and they would sell to medical centers, but it was really, they'd try to sell Azure, they'd try to sell Microsoft productivity tools. And so by purchasing Nuance, what they got with that were several different things, because Nuance really owns, you don't know about this unless you're a radiologist, but they own a lot of the radiology space.
Really?
So almost every radiologist uses a Nuance product called PowerScribe. And then we also at
Hmm.
Nuance owned a lot of the dictation space with Dragon. And then, of course, Dragon Ambient Experience, which was one of the first ambient technologies. And then the last thing that people didn't know that Nuance did, well, they actually did a ton of stuff. Like, what you might not know is, like, they had the first virtual assistant like Siri. They contracted with Apple. Apple used it for a while. Then Apple hired away all the engineers and built Siri.
Wow.
Um, and so, like,
It's
virtual
amazing.
assistants has kind of been part of their thing. So they spun out a company that does all the virtual assistants in cars. So if you get into your Toyota and you talk to your car, that's probably the old Nuance technology.
Hmm.
But the one that was still around when Microsoft purchased Nuance was kind of call center technology. So because there's a lot of chatbot kind of stuff happening in a call center, and so Nuance owned a ton of that technology as well. So that all falls under Microsoft today. And the health and life sciences division is really a fast growing division. And obviously, the OpenAI story, along with Microsoft, has revolutionized that as well. Because, I mean, now you've got all these places that can start building their own co-pilots through Microsoft, and they can
Yeah.
start building things that are HIPAA compliant because it's on Microsoft. So really cool stuff happening there.
Hmm. Which brings us to Bionic Health, doctor. You
Hmm.
you you can't get enough. You have another idea, and you started another firm, and so now this is incorporating AI.
Yeah, yeah. And it really is trying to bring together that idea of precision medicine and longevity medicine.
Hmm.
And how do you build that? And when we started it, and I started it with my friend Robbie Allen, he's our CEO. He's a great guy. He was on my board at iScribes. So he built a technology company called Automated Insights way back in the day. It was probably one of the first generative AI companies because what it would do is it would take data and then it would write. So it would
Hmm.
take like statistics from an NFL game and it would write all the fantasy football recaps for you and tell you,
Wow.
how your player was doing and how what you should expect in the future and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So that was his company and he sold it in 2015 or something like that. And so he joined my board at iScribes because I was thinking, this guy already figured out how do you take data and use computers to write something. And so can he take, we're recording doctor patient conversations. Can he help us write medical notes? And so he joined the board and just like right when he joined the board, Nuance swooped in and acquired us. So we never actually continued to build that out. And we'd kept touch for years and he reached out and he's like, "Hey, Jared, I'm looking to build something new. Are you interested in building something new?" And so we pitched around a bunch of ideas and we talked about we could build a little widget that current doctors use and it maybe makes medicine 1% better. Um, or what if we thought of a brand new way of how medicine should work? And what if we started to build that out? And what if we built it from the preventative medicine and longevity space?
Hmm.
So that was really the idea behind Bionic Health is let's start building what we think healthcare should look like. It's probably not going to be covered by insurance to start, but if
Hmm.
we can prove outcomes, it'll eventually get covered by insurance. And let's build it in a way that technology will help the doctor to actually do what the doctor wants to do, which is take care of patients. And then the technology takes care of all this busy work, all the
Hmm.
administrative work.
Hmm.
And so that's what we've been building for about a year and a half now.
So, everybody's afraid AI is going to take jobs. It'll never take away a doctor's job, correct?
There's That's a good question. Are there doctors that won't have as much work? Probably, but we have a
Ah.
doctor shortage, so that's okay.
Hmm.
I can imagine all sorts of things that AI can do for us today, in the not too distant future. So, skin mapping for moles,
Hmm.
and that will continue to get better and better. And so maybe I won't have to have as many physician assistants at my dermatology practice, um, and I'll just be spending time with people with skin cancer. Um,
Hmm.
Maybe other things I think about are that a doctor plus AI, a doctor who learns how to use AI, is probably going to displace a doctor who doesn't.
Hmm.
Because a doctor who doesn't isn't going to be able to give the great care that a doctor augmented with AI is. And then, I hope that we get to a point that there are certain things that patients can take care of themselves, take care of by themselves with AI. And some of this is arguably possible today, like health coaching, nutrition coaching, things like that. If you built it into the products the right way, you might be able to do a lot of that today with this. And luckily, not a lot of doctors do that stuff, but nutritionists do and health coaches do.
Hmm.
And I don't even think it's going to get rid of their jobs because humans were wired for connection. We're wired for needing people. And I can't really imagine a day like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Wall-E where everybody just like sits around and
Yeah. Yeah.
computers like
Big. Yeah.
take care of them. Like I can't really imagine that day. I think as humans we still want connection. We still need each other. And it's actually one of the travesties of our days, like the loneliness epidemic and how
Mm.
we've isolated ourselves more. And so I honestly hope that the AI doesn't displace us in that way. Like my hope is that we figure out how to do it together.
A trend, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, doctor, was IoT, right? The Internet of
Mhm.
Things. And we were
Yeah.
promised that it was going to be in the toilet, so to check our stools. I mean, I
Yeah.
wear a couple wearables now, but
Yeah.
I'm very much into technology. But we were promised it would be in all our shirts, so it could check our
Yeah.
sweat, and in our forks, and we'd have all this information and prevent. And it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
whatever reason, uh, AI is not going to follow that same trend. Correct?
That is a great question. I mean, Internet of Things, I would say it's still Internet of Things, I believe will happen. It's just happening
Mm,
much slower than like I know I've talked with smart toilet developers who are building, the
yeah,
ability
yeah.
to check
Very
your
impressed.
stool and check
Awesome.
your urine.
Yeah.
Um, and there are really interesting things for females now where, if you're on your period, you could send in your blood sample from
Mm,
that. And so you don't have to draw my blood.
mm,
And so there's interesting Internet of Things and kind of wearable things coming still. And I think that trend will continue. But often we're not great at guessing timeline. And this kind of goes back to that your very first question, like where is medicine going to be in 5
yeah,
years because of
yeah.
AI? And like the timeline is hard to guess. And it's because you have so much friction to change. Like imagine changing everybody's toilet. Like
Right.
imagine like everybody has to buy new utensils. And like it it eventually happens and there are reasons that things happen. Like some of the really interesting trends to look at is like mobile phone adoption. And when mobile phones started, what, the late 70s, early 80s? And now, like, they're pretty ubiquitous. You go to a third world country, people have their mobile phones.
Yeah,
And so, but I mean, that was 40, 50 years
yeah,
to get to this
adoption.
point. And so, like, Internet of Things, I think will still happen. It's just going to be slower. AI adoption, how fast is it going to happen? Honestly, it'll be driven by the market. And it's either going to be like, is it saving us more money?
Mm.
How hard is it to displace the things that are already there? Can we make more money? Does it make our life better? Does it make the life easier? Those are the questions that it will have to answer to displace what's there right now.
Yeah, and we're hearing the term wearables a lot, and the problem is there. Like I have one of the rings, right, and it's giving me
Yeah, yeah,
data
yeah,
every day, and I have a watch that's giving me something. Then when I play golf, I wear a
yeah,
different watch because it tells me the distances, but it
yeah,
also monitors my steps. So there's all this data.
yeah.
And I don't check it every day, doctor, and
Right,
I was
right.
just told recently some things I should look at. It's my resting heart rate is which is great. I take a look at that at least a couple times a week. But that's
Yeah.
the other issue. Sometimes it gives us so much data, we don't know what to do with it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that is so to me, one of the biggest problems in healthcare and for people is like we're not data scientists. And
Mm,
so like crunching data, extracting data, some companies are better at showing us the data than others.
mm,
Like Apple actually does a pretty good job of showing us data, but it's hard to get to. Like who uses their health app on their phone? Not very many people. Like it's got good data in there, but and the reason it's kind of hard to get to is like, how many of us want to see that data? And is it going to change anything for us? Are we going to change our actions because of that data? And so those questions are difficult. But then let's take healthcare as a whole. Like now let's take all of your medical records. And like the interesting thing to me is okay, there's one problem to solve is data aggregation. So if we believe that eventually we'll have an AI that's smarter than a doctor, we'll have an AI that's smarter than any scientist in the world,
mm,
I want that AI to evaluate all my data
hmm,
and tell me what I'm missing. But as it sits today, my data is in, five different healthcare institutions and it's on four different wearables. And, so like one problem to solve is like, how do you aggregate that data into one place? How do you make it machine readable or easier for the AI to look at? You know, the AI companies are getting better at, making it so it can look at video, making so it can listen to audio, making so it can read just regular text on a
Hmm.
regular piece of paper or handwriting or whatever. So maybe you don't have to clean up all the data like we did in the past, but how do I get all my data in one place? It's kind of like my business partner will talk about travel agent. Like the travel agent, an automated travel agent or AI travel agent, or even a personal travel agent can't plan my trip if it doesn't have my data, like my preferences.
Hmm.
They need to know I like to stay in Airbnbs, not hotels. They need to know that I like to stay in the middle of the city, not in the suburbs. They need to know
Hmm.
I never take red eye flights. Need to like all this data. And one way is I tell it explicitly. The second is if I give it all my past data, then it can infer all that. And it
Hmm.
can say,
Hmm.
90% of the time, it looks like you don't fly red eyes. And
Hmm.
so I'm not going to book you for a red eye. Or to ask me, like, this is what I saw in your data. Is that correct? And I say, yeah, that's exactly right. Go ahead and plan my trip for me.
Hmm.
So I like to imagine that we're going to get to that point with our health data. In like our wearable data, it's super interesting that these wearable manufacturers, they try to charge us for the software, right?
Yeah.
So they try to charge us for the insights from the software. And I I think that will disappear in the
Hmm.
future. Like there's what they offer isn't that unique. It's not that valuable. And if as long as I can extract the data and share it with the central AI or repository, that
Hmm.
that's what I want because it will tell me when the data actually is important.
Hmm.
Like it'll say, "Hey, I noticed your resting heart rate went up and your body temperature went up, and I've noticed COVID spikes in like public health data. Do you think you should get a COVID test?"
Wow.
Or something like that. Like that's really interesting.
Yeah. That is, and the other another issue is that sometimes my ring will tell me I had a great night's sleep, and my watch will tell me I had a fair one. And that I guess that's another issue we got to get over. But yeah, you're right. One central area where it can just get these sources and give me some common sense advice, like you said that, like you just explained there, is really really exciting. And as it's been explained to me, doctor, we're currently we're talking about OpenAI, ChatGPT. We're at the kind of they describe it as middle school, right? Started grammar
Yeah.
school, now we're middle school. Next stage, as we stand here, beginning of fall 2024, then it's going to get to high school and it's going to college. It's going to be amazing transition. But we've seen in the past where Big Blue Watson beat the Jeopardy champion, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was Watson or it was another one that beat Gary Kasparov in chess, right?
Yeah.
And then of course he complained that it's not good at chess, it's only good at beating me. There's always
Mhm.
these kinds of things, but I mean that's happened though about 10, 15 years ago. What's taken so long?
I mean, that those are good questions. Like one thing is those were very specifically trained and
Mm,
even just training. So let's just take chess, for example. Training a system to be really good at chess took all the compute power that we had back in the day.
wow.
And then the more impressive one recently is the Google who built the AlphaGo,
Yeah.
which played the game Go and beat people at that. And
Right.
um, that was a much larger data set and took more creativity to build. But what's happened is compute cost, meaning the cost of computers has gone down just so exponentially that we can train these AI models with so much more data. That's one big revolution that's happened in the last decade. The other big revolution is in 2017, Microsoft came out with this idea of these transformer models, which are these neural nets. And that's really what all this new technology is being built on. So it's a different kind of AI. It's not rules based. It's not, we don't have to explicitly tell it what to do. It will teach itself and it will adapt itself and then it will relearn and reteach. And so
Mm,
that's what's really interesting about this new AI. And that's why we see these giant leaps because nobody was paying attention before Chat GPT came out. Nobody was really paying attention. I was playing with GPT-3 and seeing, and that was Chat GPT when it came out was 3.5. So I was playing with GPT-3 and thinking, oh, this is actually interesting. This can do some pretty good stuff if you have an expert guiding it. But then ChatGPT came out and everybody was like, whoa, this is amazing.
Mm.
And I think we will continue to see these large leap forwards. Just last week, OpenAI released uh, Model O1, which is a new reasoning model that can do really interesting kind of step by step reasoning. It will go back and correct itself, which the models in the past couldn't do. They would just write a word
Amazing.
and then guess what the next word should be and guess what the next word. And this new model will actually go back, correct itself before it shows you the full answer.
Mm.
And so I think they'll continue to get smarter and smarter at an alarming rate, honestly. Like we won't really know what to do. And I even think today we have AI that is capable to do things that in 5 years we'll think is magical, but it takes time to build that AI into a product. Because products take connecting all these different things, presenting it to somebody, them finding value in it. And it's going to take us time to build that.
It's exciting. It's daunting. I remember hearing an interview once with Elon Musk about talking about the AI engine they made for the car to auto drive,
Yeah, yeah,
and he said that they never taught it to read; it taught itself how to read.
yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, it is amazing. They call those emergent capabilities. So, like,
Mm.
you don't tell it to have this capability, you don't train it to have this capability, but then it surprises you, and it's like, look,
It has
I've
it.
got this capability. And so, yeah, it's exciting. It is a little scary. There's that sci-fi nerd in me that's like,
Yeah, yeah.
are we headed towards Skynet? Like,
Skynet. Yeah,
I hope
Terminator.
not. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And what do you think about what Elon Musk is doing with the is it the neural net company where they're putting thing in people in
oh
brain?
yeah, yeah, Neuralink.
Neuralink.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, fascinating. Just a different way to have an interface between a computer and a body, and and yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can get to a point where, and I think they will. All technology just continues to advance, um, but if they can get to a point where it can control, like an exoskeleton, like can it move my
Mm,
body
mm,
in ways with if I have a machine attached to my body, um, in what kind of interesting things can it do, and can it do it better than other ways that we've done in the past? Like there are
mm.
much less invasive ways, like you can type with your eyes, you can
Right.
control things with your eyes. Like that's way less invasive than drilling a hole in my skull and putting
Mm,
wires into my brain.
mm.
So, I mean, that's part of the question is like, do we actually need all the invasiveness to accomplish what we want to accomplish? Can we do it through ultrasound waves? Can we do it through other technologies? I imagine we're going to figure out ways to do it non invasively that we won't actually have to drill holes in skulls, but it'll be interesting to watch.
I saw an interview with one. I think he only has one or two people that are connected to it, and the
Yeah.
one gentleman's a paraplegic, and he could play video games with his eyes now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, really incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the potential is amazing. I think Elon Musk is playing the long game. Like he
Yeah.
wants that in everybody. He's not just
Right.
thinking about
Yeah.
paraplegics and quadriplegics. But I think for medical, for those who need that kind of technology, it's fascinating.
And now, having these ideas, being in the medical profession, trying to use technology and AI to bring it to a great place, you still have to kind of have this startup culture and be a leader. And are you able to bring any of those skills over just to have to be a good culture fit, to create a good culture, to create a product in an environment like that? Is it an easy transition?
I mean, medicine is a tough place to innovate in because it's slow to change,
Mm,
and because incentives are aligned funny in the US. Our incentives are aligned towards
yeah.
insurance companies, not health. And so, there is difficulty. And lots of the companies that are out there crushing it, they're usually figuring out some loophole in the payment system.
Mm,
So it's not necessarily like always that it's a great technology. Like it might be that it pushes doctors to prescribe a cheaper drug. It might be that it makes doctors call patients more frequently, or whatever it is. And some of that does help with outcomes like health, but others, it's just exploiting a loophole that's out there. And so I'd say the hardest parts about innovating in healthcare are, one, it's a very complex space.
Hmm.
And you really have to know a lot. And that takes time. It takes time to learn everything. And we've seen big tech after big tech company fail in healthcare. Google in the past had this big Google Health division, and they've
Really?
mostly closed that down now. Microsoft, way back in the day, I think had something called Health Vault, and they mostly that's closed down. There's been try after try from big health. I'd say Apple has moved the slowest in this area,
Hmm.
and that's probably why they're going to be the most successful. Is they've been very slow, conservative, methodical, learning about it, bringing doctors onto the team to help them build it.
Hmm.
So it's difficult to innovate in healthcare because it's so complex, and people assume it's easy. Like, people would look at an electronic health record that a doctor used and think that's a terrible piece of software. I bet I could write one better. And there's been thousands of companies that have done that and tried and failed because they were engineers that didn't understand the space.
Mm.
And so you really have to bring together those two things, like a very, very deep medical knowledge and a very good understanding of technology and product. And how do you build those things, and how do you test it quickly? And because it's expensive to build product, it's expensive to hire engineers. And so how do you do that quick enough that you can build a business that creates money so that you can continue to do it?
I've been fortunate to be part of some SaaS startups, doctor, and building software is a lot less difficult than selling it. But when you're selling, right, because then you've got to get salespeople, and if it's B two B, you got to make business sales. And if it's B2C, it's very different. But still,
Yep.
you still got to get that component of sales is just as important as the engineers. But it seems to
Yeah.
me in the medical area, since the customers are being the customers, the doctors are being paid by the insurance companies. That's a whole nother level of complexity. That's just big nuisance.
It is. It is a nuisance. I mean, it's good and bad. One good thing is nobody's going to swoop in and dominate healthcare. No
Uh,
technology company.
right.
So it makes it so that a lot of players can be successful in healthcare.
Levels.
Now,
Interesting.
you might see private equity try to like build out, like buy everybody, or you might see a technology try to buy everybody in a vertical. But it makes it nice so that you can have a lot of players in healthcare because it's so fragmented, hard to sell into. So it's good and bad. It makes it somewhere that everybody can play, but if you don't figure out how to sell into a fragmented market, you're going to be unsuccessful.
Hmm. So at Bionic Health, you're the co-founder, but you're the chief medical officer. So you're not the
Yeah,
CEO. Uh,
yeah.
what keeps you up at night with Bionic Health?
Oof. You know, when we started, we did 100% direct to consumer,
Mm,
and um, me and my co-founder, we're not direct to consumer guys.
right.
And so we've had to learn because we did B2B SaaS like you. And
Yeah.
so like we know that playbook. How do you build a sales
Mm,
force?
mm,
How do you train a sales force? How do you go after
mm,
a business? And so like I don't think I'm not as I'm not an influencer. And you see, like, I don't know if you've heard of Function Health, which has Dr. Mark Hyman, who is an influencer. And they raised $50 million to basically provide lab tests. And like I think they probably do some interesting things, and I'm glad that we have somebody in the space who can bring attention to it. But like he can kind of raise that kind of money because of his influence.
mm,
And so yeah, I wish I could expand my realm of influence. At the same time, I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be recognizable. I don't want to like walk through an airport and have
mm,
somebody say, "Hey,"
yeah.
like there's that part of me, that very private part of me that doesn't want that. But I mean, that's kind of what keeps me up at night is like, how do we share the message? How do we share
Mm,
that we can help you live a longer, healthier life today? and that we have a different way of thinking about medicine, and that we've had amazing outcomes. And, up till now, most of our growth has just been people telling each other about it. We started with our friends and family doing it, and then we had some of their acquaintances sign up, and now it's mainly just word of mouth. People saying, "Hey, like I'm doing this Bionic Health. My 30-year risk of a heart attack dropped by 20%.
Wow.
I've increased my strength by this much." Like people talking about outcomes, and then also we're not the most expensive. There's elite services out there like Dr. Peter Attia charging hundreds of thousands a year. There's services like Fountain Life, 20,000 a year. And there's services like ours that are a couple thousand a year. And really trying to figure out like how can we affect the most number of people possible.
Hmm.
So those are the kind of things like, there's, and this from being in SaaS, there's different levers you could pull. Like we could go up on price and then I don't need as many customers.
Right.
But we want to make this super attainable for as many people as possible until insurance starts paying for it. And there are those trade-offs. And I don't know that we've always made the right choices. Maybe we should have charged $10,000
Mm.
so that we'd have more money to build technology. So all sorts of trade-offs. And those are the kind of things that keep me up at night.
Yeah, yeah, those are big decisions. And
Yeah.
what exactly does it do for the consumer, Bionic Health?
Yeah, so I think it's a really cool experience. I mean, we designed it, so of course I'm going to think it's a cool experience.
Bit biased.
So, yeah, a little biased. Currently, we practice our full suite of medical care in about 15 states. So we don't cover the whole U.S., but we cover like 60% of the population. As soon as we open up California, it'll be like 80% of the
Mm.
population. So we cover a big part of the population of the U.S. and they sign up, and as soon as they sign up, usually they do that through the app. So they just download the app. The app will place the first lab order for them. It will have them set up an appointment with one of our health coaches, our bionic advisors. And it's going to be a very different experience because we're going to ask them about their diet, their nutrition, their stress, their sleep. We're going to ask them like how much do they want to change and really figure that out. I mean, this, like so much of the problems that people face today, it's really a discipline problem or a habit problem. Like, how do I build this into a system so that I can change, and how can I do it in a way that is sustainable? And so that's a lot of what we do is we help coach people through that. So they go through that meeting with the health coach. And then once their lab work comes back, and we do some very specific lab work because our biggest thing for longevity is first, don't die. So first, let's look at the highest risk things for any one person of why they might die. And for all Americans, it's heart disease,
Mm.
vascular disease. So we do lipoprotein little a, which less than 1% of people get screened for, but 20% of people have it.
Wow.
And it's 6 times worse than LDL, doubles your risk of a heart attack.
Oh.
So we screen everybody for that. We look at ApoB, which is more specific than LDL. We look at inflammation in your body. We look at your metabolic health. Are you on your way to diabetes? Do you already have pre-diabetes? And so we identify all these problems, all these issues during that first set of labs. And then you meet with the doctor, and the doctor comes up with a plan with you of, okay, what's precision longevity medicine look like for you? And how are we going to do this together?
Hmm.
And that's what we map out, and then that's what we execute on. And we make it step by step. So part of our app is what we call modules. And so somebody goes through that what I just described is kind of our baseline module. And so it like steps you through, it congratulates you on accomplishing something, and then it steps you to the next step. And we do that for everything. So if we identify heart is a big concern, we have our heart health module. If we think dementia is a big concern, we have our brain health module. If we think
Mm.
hormones are a big concern, we have our hormone health module. And
Hmm.
so we have all these different modules that we'll kind of put on your roadmap. We call it our journey, and then we'll execute that with you. And your coach is there. You have a messaging portal that's just like a chat that you can chat with your doctor or your coach any time of day. So it's really a ton. You hook in all your wearables. So we're building out exactly what you talked about with me, like having all your wearables go one place, and then you
Oh,
get
wow.
one data feed that says this is what you should be doing according to your wearables.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the platform as it is today. And of course, we're going to continue to build out more AI And right now, it's just very focused on preventative medicine, longevity medicine.
Hmm. What is it similar to functional medicine? What's your belief on functional
Yeah,
medicine?
yeah, I would see it super similar. I'd say functional medicine, the biggest difference between functional medicine and longevity medicine
Hmm.
is functional medicine is usually used when traditional medicine has failed.
Hmm.
So usually it's somebody with a chronic inflammatory disease. Regular medicine has failed to like get them to a cure, and they'll seek out functional medicine. And functional medicine is usually going to do very, very broad testing. They're going to do food sensitivity, microbiome, heavy metals. They're going to do a lot of different testing, and then they're going to pull on those strings and see if one of those is causing the root cause of your problem.
Ah.
Where I would say longevity medicine is a little bit more along the lines of you're pretty healthy or you're not too unhealthy. You don't have some mystery disease. And now we're going to optimize your health so you can live the longest, healthiest life. So I'd say that's the major difference in philosophy is kind of the chronic disease versus the non-chronic disease. Of course, we take care of people with some chronic disease, but if it's a mystery disease, usually I'm going to point people to a functional medicine doctor
Hmm.
and say, a functional medicine doctor is probably going to be better for you and probably a lot more expensive than what we provide, but that's okay because they're going to do this really deep dive, tons of testing with you. But very similar kind of root cause, like we do a lot of that too. Like let's figure out like why you have prediabetes. And
Hmm.
it's usually not a mystery like a food sensitivity. It's usually like you're eating too much. You're not moving your body enough. And we're going to help you change that.
I get to talk to a lot of functional practitioners, and
Hmm.
yeah, I really enjoy that because when I go see the doctor, my doctor almost never asks me what I eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
The new one I got does, which is good. That's really important.
Awesome.
By the way, just an article in yesterday, I think it was New York Times, BMI. So I've
Mm.
always not liked BMI. I'm an athlete, and
Yeah.
I don't have 7% body fat. I have a little bit more, but still I have big legs. I played soccer my whole life, and my
Yeah.
BMI always had me obese. And it's just a
Yeah.
simple but they're starting to move towards something else. I forget what it
Yeah.
was called. Where are you with body mass index?
Yeah. I personally I understand why we use it and it's really for population care. But we've extrapolated it down to personal care, which is crazy to
Hmm.
think like I'm going to prescribe something off of a ratio. And so yeah, I'm not a big fan. We do DEXA scans on almost everybody to get true body composition of people. Now, the gold standard for body composition is really an MRI. Um,
Ah.
the DEXA scan has been extrapolated from MRI data. And so I would say it's the second most accurate, better than an in body or an electrical impedance. Probably actually second best. One of our advisors, Abby Smith Ryan, she's a body composition expert. And she calls it the four compartment test, where you'll do electrical impedance plus a DEXA scan, and then you can come up with calculations. I actually think there's a step above that where you look at how functional is your muscle. Because to me, it's all about muscle mass. Like, how much muscle mass do you have today? How much can we build until you start losing it? And then it's about strength conservation. How much strength do you have today? How much can we build until you start losing it? And how much can we slow down your strength loss? And honestly, if I talked about the number one thing I think most people could do for their health, that would be it. You know,
Hmm.
get as strong as you can, add as much muscle as you can in healthy ways. Like, don't go out and take tons of steroids or
Right.
gear or anything like that. Like, do this in a healthy way. But if you add as much muscle as you can, as much strength as you can, and much mobility so that you're moving healthy, and you do that as long as you can, that's really the recipe. Now, there are things like, you know, really bad genetics for cholesterol or dementia. Those things are kind of the other things that we want to tackle. But the number one thing for everybody is that very simple equation: get as strong as you can,
Hmm.
and keep it as long as you can.
Do you miss practicing medicine?
Well, I practice at Bionic, so I take care of patients here.
Ah, you do?
So yeah, yeah,
Ah, good, good, good.
yeah. So I,
Yeah.
I I love that. It's so cool to see people change and have their lives kind of transform and tell me.
Mm.
One of my favorite is we have a guy. He's this high functioning tech CEO, and he's lost like 70 pounds and
Wow.
added a bunch of muscle. And I mean, kind of like you did by yourself,
Yeah, yeah.
and so it's fun to coach him through that and see that change happen.
Yeah, I started my business, back in the '90s, and I was not, practicing good nutrition and, not working out anymore, and, yeah, I got myself up to, 340 pounds. The doctor, I just remember this like it was yesterday. She's like, "You're not gonna see your daughter graduate, with this weight."
Hmm.
And so it just, scared the life out of me, doctor, and, driving home, punching the steering wheel, and it's like,
Mm,
as my pie hole. I'm the one who did this, and
yeah.
and it's it's a big issue here, right, in the states, and people want, there's drugs available now, and there's all these kind of quick things, and people always ask me, "What's your secret? What's your secret? What you do?" And I never have a secret. And you alluded to
Hmm.
before. I just say discipline. That's how I kept it off. I got willpower, routine, some direction, and you can't look at it as a finishing line. We have this crazy
Yeah.
statistic where people gain it back,
Yeah.
and that's just worse than ever. So I was a 46-inch waist. I have pictures of all the clothes I got rid of, and down to 32-inch waist, and uh you just have to kind of change what you do permanently. How does
Yeah.
discipline play a role in your life, Doctor Jared?
Oh, I mean, it's funny. Like my wife would say that I hate discipline, probably.
Ah,
Mostly, I'm a little bit of a rebel and not like the best rule follower,
mm,
um, which kind of is how my career ended up how it did.
good point.
But um, but actually, I mean, discipline is huge. Like the amount of information you have to learn in medical school is huge. Just
Mhm.
making it through, getting into medical school took a lot of discipline. It definitely, I've always kind of exercised, but kind of ended up definitely. I did not weigh 340 pounds. I weighed 235 pounds and was, my most unhealthy working in the emergency department, and decided like
Mm,
this is something that has to change. And really, you just have to become a different person. You have to, become a person who exercises. Like that's just who I am. I'm a person who eats healthy. It's just who I am. And you got to change. And I think what's hard for people is they want that to happen overnight,
right.
and it just doesn't. And there's lots of ups and downs. And what I always tell my patients is progress over perfection. Like you
Hmm.
will fail, and that's okay. That's part of the plan, because then we're just gonna like get back up and keep going. And if you don't, if all you want is perfection, then you're going to just quit again and again and again. And so you got to just keep progress over perfection.
It just takes time. I mean, there are some days where you're working out and you're not eating, and still you didn't lose any weight. You
Yeah.
can't weigh
Yep.
yourself every day. Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
progress over perfection. Yeah, it's true. It's real easy to put on. It's hard to take off.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. What about you, Joey? What's like kind of your number one thing that keeps you healthy? What's your
Well,
thing?
back then it was this. It was the realizing that it's not just me anymore. Right? I have
Mm.
this girl that I brought into this world somehow, and
Yeah.
I now have a family, and so me being unhealthy just isn't about me. It's not being able to provide and
Mm.
watch and care and love my family. So that was the motivate. That was like kind of my come to
Yeah.
Jesus. Some people say you need that kind of rock bottom thing. Some people say you don't. But for me,
Yeah.
that was the big smack. And my doctor, to this day, I'll see her and maybe I added a couple pounds, and she'll say something like, "Hey, did the Peloton break or something?" So she's always had that,
That's awesome.
yeah, that sarcastic, and so that I need that. That's my sense of humor. That's my motivation. So,
Yeah.
you know, and now that my daughters have gone on, I'm empty nest. It's still trying to stay healthy and not let all this bad work. There's still this 340-pound guy inside me trying to get out. I think of it every once in a while. When I'm
Yeah.
when I'm having a slice of cake every once in a while. And
Right.
generally 80% of the time I eat well, and 20% I slide, of course. But
Yeah.
it's just kind of quelling that, and just seeing those pictures of me then and now. That I don't know, that puts me in the right place. I wonder what other triggers are for other people. I'm not sure. Do you mentioned before your wife said you wouldn't be disciplined. My significant other would probably say the same thing. I'm not the disciplinarian in everything. In some things I am, right? I mean, in
Yeah.
your business and your care of your patients, you have ways, you have care. It's a very I have this ongoing thesis that discipline is a spectrum,
Yeah.
of many of about 10 elements, and we pursue that the best we can. What motivates you, doctor?
I mean, I'm I'm on this earth. like
Yeah.
I'm on this earth and I might as well make the best of it. And just like any human, I have my dark parts of my story, my bright parts of my story, the parts that I like of myself, the parts I don't like of myself, all those things. But at the end of the day, there's a few things that motivate me. And one are my core values. And I recommend everybody do this exercise. And I read it in a book from Brene Brown. It was actually her book on business. And she talks about like identify your personal core values. And she has this sheet, and you just go through and you circle things that resonate with you. And then you keep like trimming it down until you get to a couple. And so my two core values are courage and compassion. And
Hmm.
so just like show up with courage every day. If it scares you, do it. Like that's kind of my thing. And then compassion. Compassion towards other people, really want to hear their story, understand their story, and then help them as much as possible. And so I'd say those are the values that drive me. And then the most important things in my life, my wife, my family, like those are number one. And then kind of move down the line, it's really those personal relationships. And then it gets to my business and things like that. So and sometimes that order falls in ways I don't like it.
Mm,
Sometimes all of a
mm.
sudden all I'm thinking about is business and I'm not thinking about my family. Sometimes but that's how I try to prioritize my life and put my life in order.
Now that's wonderful, doctor. So, given that motivation, how do you measure success?
So I that's a good question because the whole adage, what you manage what's measured.
Mm,
And I would say I don't have like one number. In business, you always are hoping to find one number. Like if I find this one number that I can see, are we being successful or not? And I don't know that I have that one number because it really is multifaceted, and I measure my success based on how is my relationship going with my wife and my kids,
mm,
how is the business going, how is my body feeling, how am I feeling mentally, and so there's like all these different things that I measure for my success. And I've never built it into a system. Like I've heard of people like I have a system and I rank all these things every day or every week or and really it's just more of like kind of a gut feel like
mm.
how am I in these things. And I usually will once a week think through all of those things. I'll think how are things with my wife, and her and I, we have a weekly meeting where
Oh,
we
nice.
talk through things and make sure things are good. Um and but I think about each one of my kids and like how are things with each of them, how am I going to connect with them, how am I going to keep growing that with them. And so I kind of do that kind of work. And then business is kind of easy because I've got it, all this work to do, and I just like jump into it, and I'm always thinking about it.
Mm,
That's honestly the easiest part, and probably the most obsessive part that I have to actually kind of control and have
mm.
a little bit of discipline about. Because I would probably work like 7 days a week and kind of nonstop, just because that's kind of how I'm built.
Yeah, I can relate so much to what you said because, when I was at that weight, I didn't really feel bad because your body's
Mm,
wonderful and I was young and it just adapted. Certainly going upstairs, I'd lose my breath a little bit, but your body just adapts. And until you said you have weekly meetings with your wife, which is, until
yeah,
that doctor told me, hey, this is not good.
yeah,
This is where you are now is not good. And that was the reality check. And, I'm not saying don't believe in your gut. I always tell my daughters that, watch what people do, not what they say, and try to
hmm,
trust your gut. But it's a very, very delicate balance. I love what you're doing, and I love the way that you're getting your profession, your skill, your passion, and you're helping others with it. I mean, that's a lot of us can kind of keep this and keep it to ourselves and our family, but you're opening it up for others. It's a sign of a remarkable person, doctor. I appreciate it. Anybody listening, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, bionichealth.com. Check us out. If you want to, just download our app. We have some free things you can do. You can upload labs, you can order labs, you can do some kind of interesting things on there for free, hook in wearables. But check us out there. We have a great YouTube channel. We have a podcast, Medicine 3.0,
Yep.
where I talk about all this stuff. So yeah, enjoy. I love what you do. I think that being willing to spend your time kind of teaching others how to live their best life is remarkable as well. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. Thank you. Bionichealth.com. You got a great podcast. You bring doctors on, and it's really cool the way the relationship is. It's interesting to me to hear doctors talk to each other because you speak in a
Mhm.
very different language, but we could I as a non-medical professional could still understand, but can see this is how people think of it when I'm talking technology with people.
Right, right,
But
exactly.
it's interesting how you just kind of relate that way. But the podcast is great. The website and Jared, Jared, Pelo, Pelo, as well. You're on LinkedIn and
Yep,
a couple other areas. Thank you so much, Doctor. If I'm in the greater Raleigh, Durham area, perhaps we'll get a cup of tea.
for sure. I'd love it. I'd love it.
You be well. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.